an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 5, Episode 2, The Wrath of the Time Bees. In this episode, Elliot and Margo are trying to find a way to make things not have happened the way that they happened. And they just keep making other terrible things also happen. And I'm really worried about what Elliot decides to do with that letter. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashley for commissioning this episode. All right, so guys, this is a real messy one because it's got a bunch of theories in it about how things work out if you try and mess with time. And I am really not sure if these hold up when you poke and prod them. I'm not going to poke and prod too much because I don't feel like that's really in the spirit of the thing. Like, we're just supposed to take it for granted that things work the way that this world says that they work, and then that's fine. But there were a few things that I was just like, I don't really understand how that can be. So we'll talk about that. The other thing I want to talk about is what happens with the apparent attempt at necromancy that Alice makes a try for here. It's very interesting what they decided to do, because I don't know if it's ever truly clarified exactly what caused this version of Quentin to be the one that she summons. I know that the whole thing is supposed to be that she summons him for the job of reading this paper, but that genuinely she is hoping to be able to keep him there, and that job is not like the truthful, honest reason for the summoning. And so that affects what he can do, right? It affects how soon he can go back. But did that desire also affect the kind of Quentin she received? Because he mentioned something at one point to Julia about just wanting things to stay the same forever. And why don't people understand that? And he says that his therapist calls it transition anxiety. Honestly, I don't know if I have ever heard a better, more succinct way of putting it. I have been realizing over the past few years of really like looking internally and studying the way my mind reacts to things. I have begun to realize that so much of my fears center around things not remaining the same. I want so bad to be able to stop things in their tracks. I want to get to a place where I am happy with where we're at and pause and stay there. And this is something that I vaguely have in mind as well, looking to the future in terms of like goals that I have set for myself. I have this odd sort of concept that I'll reach a goal and then I have reached it and good, we're all done. I don't really think past that. And what happens if I make that goal and then my life continues on, and what does that look like? It's, to use a very tired sort of analogy, it's sort of the thing where people think about losing weight and they picture what they will look like. They picture getting to their goal weight and what that means for them. But they don't consider that when you get to the weight that you want to be, if you manage to do that, you don't just stop doing everything that you have been doing to reach that goal. You don't get to simply drop it. That's your life now. That's how you have to live in order to be able to stay that way. And likely, as you get older, you will continue having to make tweaks and changes as you do not get the results you expect. And the human body is, for me, one of the most terrifying things because of that, the fact that we don't stay the same. So as soon as you begin to get used to whatever body you're in, after you go through a major change in your appearance or in your physical abilities or what have you, you will just barely have started to get used to that and it will change again. This is just so relatable. So she does a couple of things. It's very clear pretty quickly that this is Quentin. The kid that's playing him is really good. I think he has a really nice balance of wry humor that's extremely understated, and also this overlying feeling of being a little bit neurotic, being a little bit oversensitive or just over imaginative. And he asks Alice to take him to Taco Bell. Again, super relatable. I really feel like me and little Quentin would get along way better than me and older Quentin. So we cut to Fillory. And Elliot is looking around for the portal tree, and he comes across a ghost, I guess, of Fen being hanged. Now, guys, this is a really well done scene. This is such a really excellent blend of humor and horror. I was taken aback by where they wound up going with this and how quickly it happened. It's a very sudden transition. So it starts off rather funny, and Fen is getting hanged by this hangsman, I guess. And she's saying, "Can you promise me something after this? We can still be friends." And he just goes, "Ugh," and kicks the stool out from under her. And she begins her feet begin to shake, and she's hanging. She's strangling to death. And then Elliot runs up and she looks at him and says, "Elliot, hey." And he says, "How are you talking right now?" And she says, "I'm dead, not rude." And she says, "It's hard to be mad. I was a terrible high king," or "That's what a lot of people screamed at me, and a lot of strangers screaming at you can't be wrong. Anywho, they hung me. Fen out, bitches." Guys, the delivery of all of these lines is so good. I have always liked Fen in general, but I have never loved her the way I loved her in this scene. This effort to remain cheerful and make things light and fun when she's talking about her death is so understandable. Again, so much that's relatable this episode. I do either the Fen or the Margo. I get enraged and bitchy like Margo, or I do this and trivialize something way too much to make somebody else feel better. And it is not a great coping mechanism either way. So Elliot says, "I'm sorry I wasn't here to save you." And she says, "It's okay. Really. Last I heard, you were still possessed by the monster. And I figured if they did save you, you'd probably be off drinking. So I was counting on Margo to save me, honestly. Or Quentin, or Alice, or Penny, or Julia, or Dean Fogg. But I know the man I married." And he has tears in his eyes as he says, "Too well, it seems." That is a rough scene. Somebody telling you they knew better than to count on you, so don't worry about it, is insanely hurtful. And it might be true. I mean, it seems that most people feel this about Elliot, and Elliot seems to know that they are right in his heart of hearts. That's what's so hurtful about it. When somebody says this shit to you, and you really do not believe that, and you have some like personal evidence that you can hold up to be like, that's not what happened at all. That's a very different feeling from somebody saying your own shit to you right in your face. And it is something that I have watched recently happen with a couple of mutual friends. And it is a real crapshoot how somebody reacts to that. It's either kind of what Elliot does, where it doesn't seem like it seems like he is pushed to do more than maybe he should, because he feels like he should do something. And so they sort of overcompensate, or they completely retreat. And that is the one that I have just seen. And it's really rough for somebody to be told that they are unreliable, and then they decide you were the bad guy, and so they are just going to ghost you forever. And I am glad that Elliot doesn't have that reaction, because honestly, between this and the kind of fight that he and Margo have later, I sort of wondered if he would just ghost everybody, if he would do the like, honestly, you guys are better off without me thing. I'm glad that he didn't, because I feel like there is so much potential in Elliot. But God, it is tough to like, to know that he hasn't come that far from season 1 Elliot in terms of his ability to like stand on his own and not rely on other people to sort of pull him out of the fire. And this is obviously setting aside all of season 4 in which he is possessed. That's a whole other issue. He is very proactive when it comes to like saving himself, because what else did he have to do? That's really the thing, you know? So, yeah, this was a rough thing to watch. So then she says, look at your sad face. Don't be hard on yourself. I'm already dead. It's not like you can do some kind of magic to turn back time. And then she stops, wait, unless can you? And then she says, Elliot, if you can save me, you have to do it. And as she says this, her face begins to turn gray and her eyes go white and her teeth begin to rot. The buzzards are coming soon to peck out my eyes, my poor dead eyes. And she starts screaming it. And it's really awful. And part of me is wondering if this is a setup. If like this mirage here telling him if there's anything that you can do to save me, you have to do it, is somebody trying to press him into making this kind of mistake that he's about to make. But I can't decide if it's because there's genuine, like there's the thing that happens with Josh as well. And he turns up as a ghost that can sort of talk to Margo, and that felt real. So there is a precedence. I just don't know though. Okay. So we go to Margo in her cell, trying to find a way to break out of the cell and finding out that it is magician proof. And yet, in her attempts to bust out, she shakes a rock loose in the wall. And behind it, she finds a letter that Josh wrote while he was locked up, lamenting the fact that he has made a magician proof dungeon. He's rather irritated at himself for this. And explaining exactly what happened. So essentially what it was that there were these monsters being reported called the Takers that were like on the peripheries of the, what do you call it? Of the territories. We knew something had gone right when magic came back stronger than ever, but then we didn't hear from you. And then we see Tick coming up to them talking about how he has news, but they interrupt him to ask about their friends and what's going on with their friends. And they are just not really listening to anything that they're being told about what's happening here now. Days turned into months with no word from anyone and no way for us to return to Earth. So her languorousness, Abigail, advises we send our armies to the northern marsh to investigate the reports of these creatures. The locals call them the Takers. And we see Josh reply, "Look, man, I may be drowning my sorrows in fried chicken, but I'm not an idiot. We're in over our heads. That's why we need to get a message to Margo." So what I love about this is really playing with the whole idea that there are certain people who are the main characters of this show that we see that way and those who aren't. And I really love that they decided to carry this theme a little bit into this season when it's, you know, Quentin's gone. Like, one could argue the point has been made with him being taken right out of the story. But I like the idea that maybe some characters are better at getting themselves together than others when the person they tend to rely on is taken out of the equation. And granted, they're talking about Margo, not Quentin. But what I mean is, in each scenario, whether you're in Fillory or on Earth, there is one person that people tend to go to ask questions or find, or like pal up and team up. And there is one person that people turn to. So what happens when you are left to your own devices? And it's not just that that person is gone, like in Quentin's case, but Margo is out there somewhere and they just can't get in touch with her. So that specifically is like a real gray area of, they don't know she's dead. They don't know she's unavailable, like just straight up. They just figure there's a way and we haven't found it yet. Keep working on it. But they are thinking so far below what they're capable of. All they are convinced they can do about the situation is look to somebody else for leadership. And they are ignoring the fact that they have the power. There is so much that they can do, and they're not doing any of it. So, yeah, this is a really interesting little, like, puzzle that they wind up having to figure out. He says the people rose up against us. There's this amazing, like, charge between Josh and Fen, who have two weapons, but Fen is carrying both of them and isn't allowing Josh to have any, which is just so hilarious. And Josh writes, "Margo, I hope it's you who finds this, and I hope you understand. I did it all for you. Goodbye." And she is very, very touched by this. So begins this sort of crusade to figure out how to fix this. Meanwhile, Elliot is sort of doing the same thing. It's a really interesting thing to see him. He goes to the, what do they call her? The time witch? The clock witch? The clock lady? I can't remember. But you know who it is. And she is unwilling to help him because she has seen how many times magic, and using time magic specifically, has only made things worse. And how the ripple effect, the consequences of making these changes are just so far outside of what you can predict that you might think you've solved the problem, and then it turns out in the end that had the opposite effect. I found this really interesting. I really, really liked the conversation, and I totally understood where she was coming from. But she mentions at one point, talking about Quentin and deciding what to do with him, and she says his best friend had died tragically. And Elliot says, "Julia." And she says, "You, a victim of your own vices. I was worried that I was taking advantage of him, of his sorrow. So the first change I made was to save you, to see if he would still answer Fillory's call. And he did. And then he died 39 times. And I'd hoped this time would be different. And Elliot tries to be like, it could be. But she's like, he sacrificed purposefully to win. And he did win. If we undid the sacrifice he made, it also undoes the win. And everything he fought and died for will be lost. You paid a price. You can't just ask for a refund and keep the thing. That's not how that works. And she gets up to make tea, and he ransacks her shit and takes all of these little like dealios for time, magic, and mischief. So we go to Margo. I love how there's this perfume called Permanence, which you spray on yourself to keep you from being a victim of time magic in case something were to happen to make it so that you were never born. You do still exist despite that. I don't know why Elliot is allowed to just go and see Margo whenever he wants and hang out outside of her dungeon for as long as he wants, but evidently that's just how we're doing this, so fine. And she thinks that she has figured out a way. We will just we will just send a message via these talking bees by using this time smoker. And this is one of the things when I said in the beginning that I didn't really understand. I don't get how these bees are meant to deliver a message, but they just go on and sting the fuck out of him, even though they apparently understand human speech, and one would think they would know not that they don't need to attack him. Maybe it's just his reaction to them makes it so that they have to attack him, I guess. But yeah, the bees wind up being the cause of Josh's death. And when she goes to find out what happened behind the stone again, instead of a letter, there is a phone with a video on it. And it's her video like that she was doing ostensibly for Instagram. And she has 2 bars in Fillory, even though they don't seem to know how that could be possible. And I am super duper curious if that's of any significance in particular. Is that about the fact that the bees are here? And like, I'm very, very curious about that. So yeah, we get to see him get attacked by bees. And then we have this moment a little bit later with Elliot that I really did not care for. He pulls a history of Fillory from the library and has Fen read it so that she can see. After the Fresh Prince was stung to death by a swarm of honey-drunk assassins, High King Fen, my God, she listened to the bees. She sent an army of soldiers to hunt down the Dark King, a massive manhunt that was reviewed as tyrannical overreach by the people of Fillory. She was overthrown and executed. The takers invaded. The Dark King still rose. So she puts the book down, and Elliot says, so that's it then. And she's like, it's what? It's absolutely not it. Are you high? We don't just give up. What are you talking about? And he says, I'm just saying that we're doing all of this to save a man you ostensibly love who died of a bee sting because you forgot he was allergic. I was gone. You were alone. You hate being alone. So you grabbed the first dick that crossed your desk and you're having a hard time letting go. I think you have a textbook case of cock blindness. You are Margo the Destroyer, not Margo the pining girlfriend. And she says, to her everlasting credit, I am going to let this slide on account of you being so recently possessed. Honestly, she reacted with much more of a level head than I would have. Like, I understand maybe some of what he says about her patterns is true. But insinuating that she maybe doesn't really love Josh if she doesn't know that he has an allergy. I mean, they haven't been together very long. You know, they had this is stuff that doesn't tend to come up naturally in conversation a lot of the time. And it felt really like Elliot just kind of wanted to give up, and he was making her feel like she was ridiculous in order to get her to do that. And I was not impressed with him diminishing her and sort of belittling her, at least in my mind. I don't know. I did not like it. So anyway, she opens the book to continue reading to see if there's any further information. And she finds these stamps in the book. And the stamps have been apparently given to Jane because she was homesick and she missed her brothers and she wanted to write them a letter. So this crone, this witch in the woods, gave her stamps and said, put them on a letter and address them to them whenever, wherever, and it gets to them. So this is a really fascinating idea. And apparently, if I'm doing my math right, we do use them all up if Elliot sends that letter to Quentin. He may not. We'll see. It looks like he does. But the camera cuts away before he follows through. But if he doesn't, maybe we have we can just scratch his name off that envelope and send it to somebody else. I don't know. So she says, I can just tell Josh how to fix things. And she says, find an envelope, address it to Josh Hoberman, Castle White Spire, before he was killed by bees. So then we get to see him sharing this information with Fen, and the two of them overcoming the takers, so they think, with a banishment spell. And in the middle of celebrating the fact that they have done this, the threat comes right in through the front door and takes them all out. And we don't actually see that part. We just cut to Margo reading about it. So finally, what Margo decides to do, admirably, is to trust Josh. She's essentially like, I keep trying to tell him what to do. What if I just gave him the information that we have? And I should mention that she says to Elliot, we've got 2 stamps left. And Elliot corrects her and says, 1. I used one and to try something and it didn't work. And she says, without telling me, and he replies, I'm not your subject. And I really wanted so bad for her to press the issue and ask him what it was he tried, at least. He doesn't have to tell her he's going to do it. We know now that it's something he's planning on doing and he hasn't actually done yet. But I found it a little bit unbelievable that Elliot could use 1/3 of essentially the fuel for communication that they have without asking or saying anything to her. And she doesn't even want to know what he did with it. It bugged me a little bit. This reminded me a little bit of Hermione not asking Harry why, what the solution to the egg is. He just tells her that he thinks he's figured it out. And she just says, oh, well, good for you. And she doesn't press. Margo would want to know. Hermione would want to know. So she says, what would you ask Josh to do? Run to the nearest dive and drink himself to death? And he says, yes. And he's got tears in his eyes again. I would run away because you try to save your friends and they die anyway. You can't stop the takers. You can't stop the Dark King. And if we don't focus on getting you out, you're going to get decapitated. Fillory is fucked because it always is. And I don't get why you keep trying to fix something that wants to be broken. Hi. Just saying. I think maybe Elliot isn't talking about Fillory anymore, guys. Ugh, can I just tell you how, like, the look he got when he says that? Ugh. She says, it may be broken, but it's my home. And he says, it hasn't been your home for 300 years. And she just gives him this look and this little smile. And I think she knows exactly what the fuck is happening right there. Because Margo's no fool. And then she says, you know what? I have gone soft. I've been telling myself that if I can just keep Josh from dying, somehow I can get him and my kingdom back. But that's not possible, is it? So she just tears out the pages in the history book and tells him to read them and use this information as he sees fit. I told him he needs to stay here. He can use the information to fight the Dark King and the Takers wherever they show up for the rest of his life. And I told him goodbye. And I was just like, this is a torment. I hate it, but I get it. I just have to trust him and let it go. And kind of accept that maybe I don't get him back at all. That's not how this plays out, perhaps. So then we have her last scene where she is sitting on the cot and she's about to go behind the brick again, the stone, in order to see what's there. Maybe something has shifted since. And as she is about to do it, not sure what she's going to find and pretty certain it's going to be terrible, he appears at the door of her cell. And it turns out, this is so good, guys. He says, I got your letter. And I did exactly what you said. I went to the clock dwarf, brought him a ham sandwich, told him to send me forward 300 years. Guys, how did I not even think of that? What? How did I not even think of that? Of course that was the thing to do. What? So now what happens? Everybody came with them, apparently. So who's in power now? Is he in the Dark King's castle? He says Fen came, and Tick, and Rafe, and a few guys from my bowling league, and a dozen other people. Nobody cool wanted to stay in the past once they knew what was coming. I just don't know what this is. So he tells her to look behind the stone, and she finds the key to the dungeon there. And it's honestly just, it made me so happy, but I'm certain that there are going to be some like really, really extenuating circumstances. So she goes and meets the court that exists, like, because she summoned them there. This is High King Margo in exile, and Fen is standing there in this really elaborate outfit. And this is when they walk away, and Elliot goes to the mailbox, and he's carrying an envelope that says to Quentin Coldwater before he went to the seam. And he really has an expression on his face, like he's not sure if he wants to do this or not. He kind of seems to know it's a bad idea, but he also wants to try it. And we end the episode with him standing over the mailbox undecided. So, all right. Half my time's gone. It's time to back up. I'm going to talk about what happened with Julia coming over to Alice's house and figuring out what's going on with with the summoning, basically. I loved this so much. So we have a brief conversation between Julia and the dean about the surges and the convergences of circumstances which really affect spells. And he's talking about the surges having a pattern. And he tries to say to Julia, well, you don't have the proper education because you didn't come to break bills. The phases of the moon, large bodies of water, you must factor them in. And she says, yes, thank you. I'm fucking aware of that. And he says, but there are circumstances that make casting easier. Some of the surges must be lining up with particularly favorable circumstances. And they're thinking maybe they can predict them. And he's about to lead her to a professor's office. And that they both feel just before it happens, this surge. And then all of a sudden, that particular professor's office explodes. So I feel like that's targeted. I don't know if that's just me. But it may tie in with what happens with Katie a little bit later. And Julia, in a search for more information about circumstances, decides to talk to the smartest person she knows, which is Alice. And Alice tries to stop her at the door. But I don't know if Alice really figured Julia would recognize her or recognize him. I didn't think of it, to be honest. I kind of thought she'd be like, who's that kid? But I forgot, they knew each other from children. So she immediately is like, why is a child Quentin in your fucking house? And she figures out what is going on right away. And she sits there staring at this Quentin for a second. I love when he says, you look like someone I know. My friend Julia, her grandma. Ouch. So she basically kicks him away because they need to talk. And he takes his big bag of tacos and gets the hell out of there. And then Julia lets Alice have it and is just like, I tried to do a seance. That's all I was trying. And you said no. But then you turn around and try to create a golem out of living clay to bring him back to life? That was fine? Are you kidding me? And Alice is just, she doesn't really have a leg to stand on. She just tries to be like, it's not that crazy. And I'm like, no, but it really is, Alice, though. It is 100%. And Julia tells her how incredibly selfish this is. This is not the Quentin you knew. How could you do something like this? And Alice says that I found this letter in his stuff in break bills. I was thinking he left it for me. I wanted this, I wanted to bring him back to read it. And he can't because he's 12 and his magic hasn't come to the fore yet. I thought maybe he left it for me to find. Julia, I have to say, reacts in a way that I think is very fair, where she pins Alice with her gaze and is like, so that's why you tried to get him to come back to read this for you? Is that why? Is that why, Alice? And Alice just keeps hiding behind it, but obviously that's not it. And Alice tells her that she can't get rid of this version of him. The spell keeps the golem alive until he completes the task I brought him here to do. And Julia says, so the spell can never be finished because he can't read Q's letter. This was so insanely selfish. And Alice says, I can't sleep. I can barely breathe. I needed to fix something. Finish something for him. And Julia says, yeah. Well, you fucked up. And honestly, wholehearted agreement. Alice is taking her mother's advice to do something crazy, anything, if it helps you make it through. I don't think Alice's mom is anybody that anyone in their lives should ever take advice from. So, you know, she says something like, nobody gets to tell you how to grieve. And maybe that's true. But she stole a little bit of Quentin's soul for this spell. She's taking pieces of him away from himself to do this. This isn't just her working through her own shit. She's affecting people with this. Nah, girl, I don't think so. So, then we have the moment where Julia talks to young Quentin as he's reading the book. And he's talking about losing his best friend who's dating skeevy guys. She says, you're going to have to trust me on this one, but the skeevy guys thing is just a phase. She needs you just as much as you need her. And he seems to take that to heart. This kid is a very good little actor. I am impressed with him. I love at one point he's standing and eating and the camera's pulled back from him and he is standing just so similarly to how Quentin stood. And it was very unnerving in its way. I really liked it. So this is when she comes up with the concept that maybe Alice's circumstances affected the spell. So Alice goes and has a talk with him. And he has been telling himself this whole time that he's having a dream. But he's realized by this point that the dream has been going on quite a while and it can't be that anymore. So she tells him about how she had a friend who died and she didn't get to say goodbye. And now she has to go on without him and she doesn't know how. He gave me this gift that I can't repay. And he says, what was the gift? And she says, his life. He gave it up for mine. And baby Quentin, because she tells him, I wanted you here for closure. I thought something. I don't know really what. I could fix something. And he tells her, well, you're trying to skip the beginning of the book. I can't help you because you don't want me to, because then your friend's story is over. So you asked me here to do something, but you wanted me to not be able to do it. It's essentially what he's saying. So that you can keep me here, a version of me. You just didn't really lay out exactly how that would work. So what you got was a version of me that's too young, but when you look at the bare bones of it, it accomplishes the same thing. I am stuck here. And he says, well, that's going to end. I should just imagine this is the first page in a new book. And he says the gift your friend gave you wasn't his life. It was yours. And Alice just starts crying. And he says that story just started. And she says, I shouldn't be surprised that even at age 12, Quentin Coldwater is still the smartest person I know. And I don't know if he knew that, they all knew his name, but it is the first time I think she's called him by his name this whole time. And he kind of snuggles up against her and says, I'm feeling tired, really tired. And he leans his head against her shoulder, and you know that he is about to be done. He is about to lose function. And he says, you want to see a trick? And he does a little coin trick with her, which was honestly really cute. And a few minutes later, she goes in and sees Julia, and he is apparently gone. And it is a pretty good wrap-up, I think. I rather liked it. You know, I thought that was a nice way to end this. Oh, Ashley's here in the chat. I'm sorry, Ashley. I've been looking at the screen. I didn't even see you. She's one of those people you know will tell you to take the selfish route because that's what she would do. You get advice from her when you know everyone else would disagree with you. Ooh, that's a good point. There are people in your life that you kind of go to asking because you know they're going to tell you the thing that you want to do anyway is the thing. All right. So I got 15 minutes left. I feel like this is about adequate. I should mention Penny is still trying to figure out why he traveled involuntarily in the last episode, but that is not a focus this episode. We just hear that he's attempting to figure this out, but he doesn't really get anywhere with it. So we go to Katie, and she's at the bar with Pete, and they're talking over this building being stolen that they were looking for from last episode. And he is getting frustrated at the circles that they're sort of running in with trying to, answer the same questions over and over again. And he decides that he's going to go get drunk and bang some chick. So he goes off and leaves her. And this dude sitting beside her begins to chat her up. And I thought that it was a suspicious thing, the way he started talking to her. But, on TV, people do shit that is kind of weird to you as a real regular person all the time. So I was willing to let it slide. And I was bummed, guys, when it turns out to be what it is, because he's really cute. And I was hoping that he would get to stick around, but no. So they chat, and in the morning, they wake up together in bed. And she is feeling very groggy and weird, and clearly thinks that she actually, as she puts it to Penny later, that she relapsed. So I knew that she wasn't using anymore. I didn't know that she also wasn't drinking. If you're going to stop with drug use, stopping drinking is a good policy, because it's also a drug, and it's something that you can choose to abuse rather than the drug, and you can wind up getting yourself in just the same situation all over again. But not everybody does that. There are a lot of people who decide that they're going to stop with drug use, but try to continue drinking normally. And sometimes it works out, but it's when you have a really, truly addictive personality, it's just risky. So she wakes up and she's just kind of like, what the hell, man? I guess I drank. I don't remember choosing to drink, though. I don't remember that moment, and I would think that I would. And also, this dude, he writes his number on the back of this card, and she walks out to the kitchen and is talking to Penny, and he mentions something about the building that she was trying to find. And she looks at him and is like, what are you talking about? And he's like, what do you mean? What am I talking about? That's all that you have been working on for the past couple of days. What? What do you mean? What do I mean? And I really liked this moment where he says, I don't mean to be rude, but I thought that you were, and she says, I'm sober, and then says, well, I was. And when she says, well, I was, you get a sort of smile from her. And I was like, I really expected her to be way more upset than this, if this was, what she was trying to do. And then you find out later, as she puts it to Penny, that she was relieved to have relapsed, because that gave her permission to continue to relapse some more. And she wants that crutch. She feels like she is under a lot of pressure. She doesn't really know if she's up to it. And having this crutch, it sounded great to her. And she's really angry at herself, because she feels like, if I need this, maybe this isn't what I should be doing. Maybe I should not be in charge. Which, honestly, I get her feeling that way, but if you are even having those sort of second thoughts, I feel like you're on the right track and probably more likely to be a good leader than a lot of people. Also, this like relapsing gave me permission to relapse is such a real thing. It is so like, I actually, I'm doing Noom, which is like this, combination. It's like a calorie tracker, but it also gives you a lot of like sort of personal exercises to like read through, the mental exercises. And one of the ones from today was something called, what they use like asterisks and apostrophes and whatnot, but fuck it syndrome. And they did a study where they gave people who were trying to eat along a certain guideline, they gave them pizza, and then they told them that the pizza was either above or below the calorie threshold that those people were looking for in order to make a smart choice. And the people who overate, according to their own standard, the people who were told that pizza was way higher in calories than you thought, when they were given cookies, always ate more cookies than the people who were told that pizza was right within the target zone that you wanted. So basically, if you think that you have fucked up already, you are more willing to let yourself go ahead and really fuck up because you feel like the seal is broken now. That's this weird fucking human nature that rather than sort of try and like gather ourselves back in right away, rather than try and you know, basically revisit our goals and look at what we want for ourselves long term, we are very willing to throw that away in the short term if we feel like we've already ruined today. Rather than seeing it as, well, maybe you just kind of ruined that 15 minutes, but you still have the whole rest of the day to make better choices. And so this moment with her being like, I was glad I had relapsed. I felt relieved about it. Oh, I felt that. I really felt that. So as he begins to question her and she realizes that something is wrong with her memories, she decides to go back to the bar and try and ask this dude what the fuck is going on. And he doesn't know anything about what she's talking about. And at first, when she gives him this truth serum, it seems like he genuinely had nothing to do with it. Because he drank it, he tells her he doesn't know what happened. He starts talking about how maybe he took a chance on her because she reminds him of his cousin who he's been obsessed with since he was 13. My first cousin, but our moms are twins, so genetically she's my half-sister, which makes it worse. Why am I saying all of this? And she says, I truthied your drink. You drugged me to see if I drugged you? You are insane. But I swear whatever happened to you, I didn't do it. And finally, she convinces him to come with her and work on this sort of like memory matrix thing that is going to help her figure out what happened by piecing together both of their broken memories. He tells her, I got to my building this morning and I couldn't remember which apartment was mine. I thought, hey, crazy night. But it seems like if your memory was changed, so was mine. So Penny puts together this thing. It is one of those, like, I will take your word for it that this works, but it does just look like some, like, boho wedding arch, to be honest. And they go in there and are looking around, and apparently there is nothing that they have missed. And as they continue looking, there is this moment, and he's like really, they go past the bar that evening, which is when I thought things would have happened, and to the bedroom And they are both asleep. And he gets up in the middle of the night and turns around and begins to attack her. And she wakes up just in time to sort of stop him and bashes the memory magic back at him, apparently, is what has happened. It's a weird thing where I'm like, apparently that was supposed to be what caused him to not remember his apartment the next day. But the way he functions with this whole thing is also meant to just wipe his memory as well. So it seems like it just kind of went overboard from what it is supposed to. So he turns around and looks at her. There's this weird static effect in his eyes. And he begins to cast. When she stops him, she turns and looks at the actual dude who is standing next to her and is like, what the fuck was that? And he says, I know that looked bad, but I don't know what happened. I have no idea what that was. And she pulls him back and she says, why were you at the bar? He says, to meet a friend. And he looks kind of confused. And they go back into his memory and they see the girl who pulled Pete away, sitting down next to him, saying something to him, and doing a little casting by his face and handing him a card. And he flips the card over and gets the static effect. And all of a sudden it becomes clear somehow this thing triggered a behavior in him. And he goes to try and look at the image on the card to see what it is. And as they're trying to figure it out, the memory jiggles and vanishes. And she says, I know what was on the card. You put your phone number on it. And she flips it over. And she says, show me who you really are. And the dude appears and breaks a bottle and begins to go after her, which I really was kind of like, oh, does that work in this memory world? But they have a fight in the bar, which was pretty fun. I enjoyed this weird billiard table fight that they wind up having. And she says, someone sent you to erase my memory. Who? And he says, I have no idea. I never do. I get a job. I do it. And when it's over, I make sure I don't remember. And she says, you walk around with no idea what you do for a living? And he says, why would I want that on my conscience? And she says, because that's what a conscience is for. And he basically does the sort of an Elliot thing, which is the world is a shitty place. It's not getting any less shitty. So I do what I need to cope. And I use whatever crutch I need to. And you can try and cut my throat if you want, but I genuinely don't remember because that's the whole way this goes. So you're not getting anything out of me. And she says, well, maybe I'll have my psychic friend poke around in your brain. And his response is to simply commit suicide, which is honestly a bit extreme. Let them root around in your brain. Just let them. Go ahead. I feel like you could very easily just bail, disappear, right? Get out of there. Get out of Dodge. Hide. I mean, maybe they'd track you down and kill you eventually, but that's a maybe. This is a for sure. Who are you this loyal to that you would kill yourself to keep from giving information? That's scary. And when they leave that memory palace, for lack of a better word, the dude is actually on the floor and has died. And Penny is just kind of in shock, well, shit. Okay. So they have dinner with Pete and they tried to talk to him, but he also had his memory wiped. This woman that he slept with did the same thing to him. And Penny is like, all right, so let me get this straight. Somebody's out there with enough power to seal a building and paranoid enough to send memory wipers after you. this is really fucking serious. And Pete says, you know what? I'm going to go. I need a drink. Sort of stops and is like, hey, sorry about that. And as he leaves, this is when Katie unloads to Penny. I almost called him Quentin, and tells him, I thought having more responsibility would make me want heroin less. And I find that really interesting because that is one of the steps of being an addict. It is recommended that after you have been sober for a little while that you get a pet, because that gives you something to focus on outside of yourself that relies on you and kind of keeps you focused a little bit. So I could understand that, but this is like so high octane that it's going to have the opposite effect. It's so much pressure. Maybe Katie needs a pet too. Maybe that's what she should do. But, I just find it really interesting that she was like, I thought by adding all of this power and pressure to my life that all of a sudden I was not going to crave a thing that was helping me cope with the fact that everything had gotten completely out of control. And I'm just like, oh, girl. I mean, I get like kind of why, but honestly, that all that shit was what sort of drove you to begin using because you were in so much pain also. So, yeah, she just walks out and I don't know. I just felt bad for her. I like her character, though. I'm interested. So that is the end. I think I've covered all of the little threads there. And thank you very much to Ashley for commissioning this and for coming to the chat. I'm sorry I didn't see your comments until later on. But I hope that you guys are all enjoying the coverage. And I haven't checked to see when the next episode is, but fingers crossed it's pretty soon. And I will be seeing you all then. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.